Week 9, we're on the backside of the semester. It's exciting. Hopefully you enjoyed the change in weather. A little cooler now. So we are going into chapter 4 of Noakes's book, and this is on thermoregulation. Great topic, especially when you exercise in Southern Nevada, in the Southwest, down here in Las Vegas, where it's hot and dry. And especially during the summer, how do you exercise in those extreme temperatures? And you can be very successful in those temperatures. How do you exercise in cold temperatures? How does your body regulate core temperature? What we'll do in this chapter is we'll go over this neat observation of human performance, and that your core temperature operates in a really narrow range of temperatures. If you get outside that temperature, either too high or too low, you can run into some problems. And so it's really important to talk about thermoregulation as it relates to endurance performance. My bias in this chapter and covering this material is exercise in hot environments. But, if we're living in the Northeast or the Midwest or somewhere where there's really winter, I probably would have a bias towards exercising in cold temperatures. So it's just an interest because of where we are here in Las Vegas to try to understand how to exercise in hot environments. And so you'll see that I do talk about cold environments, but my bias is clearly slanted towards exercise in hot environments. All right, we're going to spend 2 weeks on chapter 4. And then we'll do a quiz, an exam for chapter 4. And we're going to go over things like heat balance. We're going to talk about sources of heat. How does your body absorb, or where does heat come from that could influence and raise core temperature? What are the mechanisms involved with regulating core temperature? And we'll talk about that word that you're probably all familiar with, but maybe it doesn't have the same meaning as you think, and especially in terms of performance. And that word is dehydration. What I like about what Noakes does in this chapter, as he does in other chapters, is he really challenges recommendations in terms of how much we should be drinking and what we should be drinking during exercise. And I'll go through some stories. I don't think it's this week. I think it's next week, where back in the early 1900s, the marathon runners were not taking anything, any type of fluid or drink during the course of a marathon. Now we go and watch a marathon. Let's see, Boston Marathon was just this past weekend. And New York Marathon comes up in November. Now you see aid stations every mile. Chicago Marathon has just happened too. Every mile you have aid stations. You go do an iron distance event, and it's very common to have aid stations, especially on the run every mile, on the bike every 10 miles. So you're able to have access to fluids, food, gels, fruit, whatever it is. So we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about hydration, and we'll talk about sweat rate. Which is really something that's important to understand. And we'll talk about how to measure it. It's getting a little cooler now in the fall, but I do encourage you, if you do exercise, is to, even in the fall, see if you can figure out what your sweat rate is. That's an important part to building a hydration plan. And then we'll talk about things like how much fluid should be replaced when you figure out your sweat rate. Do you replace 100%? Do you replace more than that? Do you replace less than that? And do you replace the sweat rate? Do you replace the fluid that you've lost with just water, or with water with electrolytes, or with carbohydrates, or some other concoction that you would take in during the course of an event? All right, so a little shorter on lecture content, just under an hour, 45 minutes of content there. And again, we'll do next week on chapter 4 as well. What I want you to really start spending time on this week is building your presentation. So In the previous weeks, you've identified terms that you want to focus on. You've identified empirical papers you want to focus in on, and you obviously had a question and you put together a draft answer. So now I want to start building your final project presentation. You don't need to use PowerPoint, but it's a very common structure to use for this type of project. And I'll go through the semester project assignment. I'll post this semester project assignment where what I want you to do is create a PowerPoint file with a title page, a title slide, a slide where you have your research question on, a slide where you have your terms identified, a slide where you identify the two papers, and you're not going to talk about them, but just build out these slides, and then a slide where you'll have your draft answer. And then as you go along, you can build in some of the content for that. But at least then you have placeholders for information that that I want you to have in your presentation to really nail a nice 3-minute presentation. Now I'm giving you some examples. I always hesitate with doing this because you look at these and you say, oh, this is what needs to be done. Well, I'm not telling you what the grades are for any of these presentations, so you don't know that. But, and what's important to know is that I took these from the biomechanics of endurance performance class. So I didn't double check if I pulled any from anyone who's registered this semester. And what you also don't know is which of these are grad students or undergraduate student presentations. Those of you who are graduate students in the class, you'll know because you know your grad student peers. So, but you can watch these presentations and get a sense for what you like and what you don't like. And the factors that you like or the parts of the presentation that you like, try to emulate, all right? Those that you don't like, that's fine. Then just avoid doing things that you don't like watching. All right? I'm not looking for a professionally produced video here, so keep that in mind. Some people have some good skills in that world, even in our kinesiology student body. Some of you don't, okay? And so you'll see, I think one of these presentations is more in line with just doing a presentation and having some audio over it. And you can record all that in your PowerPoint and then upload that to YouTube. And then one of these presentations is much more dynamic in terms of the video content they have. So they're all different things that you can do. You've got 3 minutes and you've got some things you need to get across. You need to get across your terminology. You need to get across the empirical evidence that you're basing your answer on, and then you're going to have an answer. All right, so this week I really want you to focus on your building the structure for your presentation. Okay, so now I did include some longer immersion videos. I really like these, and I really continue to encourage you to watch these, because what you should be doing is listening for application of the content that you're covering in the chapter. So chapter 4. So I've got Keep It Simple Coaching. These are a couple of professional triathletes that started a coaching business. And Carrie Lester is still a phenomenal triathlete. In fact, I think she just won a race recently this year and just has had a really an amazing career that got interrupted with COVID for a period of time, but it seems like she's picking up pretty good. Then I go through a presentation that I used for a conference where I talk about core temperature during swimming. This is a really interesting topic to me, and boy, you get me going. I really like this topic. And so watch that presentation. You'll see some of the research behind trying to understand what happens to core temperature while swimming and swimming in a wetsuit. Then Ted Gerard and I have one of our evidence-based triathlete episodes on how to stay warm, which is starting to get a little bit more appropriate now that we're getting into fall here. Yeah, 50 degrees is cold for us, right? But we do focus a presentation on how to stay warm. And I did realize that we have not covered hydration specifically. So Ted Gerard and I will do an episode on hydration specifically. It is in several of our episodes, but we did not have one episode dedicated to the science behind that. And then I included a presentation from Dr. Biren Shah. He is an alumni from our PT program. And I know many of you are targeting getting into a Doctor of Physical Therapy program. And so I think it's good to listen to these presentations from our physical therapists to get a sense of who they are, what they find interesting, what they're doing, and how their business model is for the type of physical therapy that they offer. And so hopefully maybe that's even a connection, because he is local physical therapist and someone who is very interested in connecting with UNLV. Okay, that's it for this week, week 9. Thanks, everybody.